there's a bit of luck, but there's also a bit of luck that you create because you're persistently trying. You're doing the work to train. You're signing up for shorter races to get yourself into shape for the 100-mile distance. You're putting your name into the lottery, making sure you qualify for different things. You're eating healthy. You're doing all the things to try to put yourself in the best position to have the opportunity. And then, your name gets called, and you just have to be ready to embrace it and go on that ride, that experience. So for me, that was really the catalyst was I got in, but really the catalyst before that was all these other little dreams. And at the time they were big, to even toe the line at one of these races. And then the curiosity of mind was, well, I know almost 40 people have done the last great race. How far can I push it? So that was just sort of a natural, I think, characteristic that I have. I'm interested in the history of our sport and where people have taken their challenges and their dreams. And so that's where the Great Eight was sort of realized.
Welcome back to the Yogi Triathlete Podcast. I'm Jess, your host, and I'm here with Coach Beej and our guest today, Sean Nakamura. The YTP is about sharing stories of people looking, finding, and living their purpose. It's through this medium that we have set the intention to bring meaningful conversations to the endurance sports world, to solidify connection, and give everyone, including us, the reminder that we're never alone in our struggles, our dreams, and our endeavors. This is all to further our collective mission to create a better world, and today we're adding to that mission by bringing you the story of a runner. Sean began running 9 years ago. He runs road, trail, everything from marathons to ultra-distance 200s. He works full-time and has a running streak well into the thousands. He leaves us all with zero excuse and certainly has inspired me to get my butt out of bed and lace up my shoes. Sean's fresh off the Tahoe 200, which in and of itself is a massive task, not to mention that he pushed through the final 60 miles in excruciating pain. But that's not all, folks. Sean's about to complete his Great Eight project that he embarked on earlier this summer, and I'm just going to let him tell you guys what that is. So Sean, thank you so much for offering us your Sunday morning, and welcome to the show.
Thank you guys for allowing me to have this opportunity to chat with you.
Tell everybody what the Great Eight is.
The Great Eight is essentially a project that extends upon both the Grand Slam of UltraRunning, the original 4 out of 5 original 100-mile races, and we basically will take that and go as far as the 8 original 100-milers in the U.S. The idea came to me after learning about a project called The Last Great Race, and essentially the Last Great Race was an extension of the Grand Slam of UltraRunning, where you essentially would do 600 milers in one summer. This was an invention of Ken Hamada, who's the Angeles Crest race director, and to date, just about 40 people have ever finished that. So naturally, I was researching and I thought, well, how far can I take this? And I realized that 3 other people had gone as far as 8 original 100-milers. And that dates back to everything through 1991, essentially. So the races include everything from Old Dominion to the Mohican Trail 100 to Western States, the Vermont 100, Angeles Crest 100, Leadville Trail 100, and Wasatch Front 100. And then as well, there's the Arkansas Traveler, which I have not completed yet, which is in about a week, and that'll be the final of the 8.
So you did a post on Instagram, and you guys, if you're not following Sean, get on board. He's UltraRunner SD on Instagram, and you posted about dreaming big. And so this is a huge dream, right? Logistically, you're kind of thinking and ruminating in your mind, okay, how big can I make this? How far can I push out the limits? But there's so much that goes into this, like the logistics, but not even to mention just the lottery. Like the lottery, you have to have a lottery to get into Western states. So had you tried this in prior seasons, or did it come this season and then just all came together?
The dream was Western states. The dream's always Western states. And for a lot of us, that's that's the process. You do everything you can to stay healthy, to train. You put your name in the hat for Western States, and year after year, for me it was 5 years. You try and try, and then eventually you get lucky. And this year was my 5th year trying. I was able to get in through the lottery, and that particular dream opened up the opportunity to dream even further. And I think that's one thing that we often will not realize, is that by not setting a dream, we don't realize dreams that wouldn't even occur to us if we hadn't set that first dream. And I say dream big, but you really don't know the scale of the dream that you're going to chase until you set things that are fairly lofty, that you're not really sure about. And once you go down those paths, they really start to open up additional dreams and challenges. So this year, when I got into Western States, I thought, okay, I know I'm going to put my name into other lotteries. Leadville Trail was another one that's very difficult to get into from the lottery. And that also took me 5 years to actually get through. Once I got into both of those two, I knew, okay, I got to do something here. And I knew about the Grand Slam, so I thought, okay, for sure I'm going to try to get into the Grand Slam. I knew about the last Great Race because I had a couple of friends. I think there have been 8 people, including myself and one of my friends this year, who have completed the last Great Race. Only 8 of us in the last 12 years. And I think it was about 40 over 30 years. And the reason for that being a little bit larger number is that it used to be easier to get into these races when no one was running 100-milers, or when a very few select folks were doing this. And nowadays, as you mentioned with the lotteries, it's actually logistically almost impossible to get into the last Great Race, or even the Grand Slam of UltraRunning, which maybe a couple hundred people have completed to date. So once I got into those 2 key races from the lottery, I had 3 other of the last Great Race of the 6 that required a lottery process, including Angeles Crest, including Vermont, and Wasatch Front as well. I was able to get into Old Dominion without a lottery, and that was essentially the 6th. There's a bit of luck, but there's also a bit of luck that you create because you're persistently trying. You're doing the work to train. You're signing up for shorter races to get yourself into shape for the 100-mile distance. You're putting your name into the lottery, making sure you qualify for different things. You're eating healthy. You're doing all the things to try to put yourself in the best position to have the opportunity. And then your name gets called, and you just have to be ready to embrace it and go on that ride, that experience. So for me, that was really the catalyst. Was I got in. But really the catalyst before that was all these other little dreams, and at the time they were big, to even toe the line at one of these races. And then the curiosity of mind was, well, I know almost 40 people have done the last Great Race. How far can I push it? So that was just sort of a natural, I think, characteristic that I have. I'm interested in the history of our sport and where people have taken their challenges and their dreams. And so that's where the Great Eight was sort of realized. And I understood that the scheduling of the summer would allow for the first 8.
So dreaming big also opens up the opportunity for potential failure. What's your relationship with failure?
I think failure is a critical tool for growth. And in terms of my relationship, I mean, for example, even starting off as a runner, as many people know, I run every day. When I first started, from couch just to a couple of miles a day, it took me a few weeks of failing, of just not even being able to run a mile without stopping and so forth. And my very first run streak was a failure. At least that's how I looked at it at the time, or someone might look at it. I was trying to get 30 days in a row. I got 21 days. So right off the bat, it was a failure. My body shut down. I got sick. My body was like, what the WTF is going on here? And then I tried again. You dust yourself off. A couple weeks later, I started another streak to try to get to 30 days. And the rest is history. I mean, 3,200 days and counting. So from the get-go, that was something that I was, very aware of. And without those moments, you don't have the opportunity to grow. And I think that's really critical. Last year I had a bad foot injury. I had to do all kinds of different things that were really just adaptive. It was rolling with the punches. It was understanding that my body needed this time to heal and so forth. And it was a foot injury. It allowed me to run, like I could run very slowly and cautiously and so forth, but I really couldn't push my training. I really couldn't push the distance so much. But you sort of figure out like how to get through those situations. And I did things like I'd have a race that, we plan these races so far in advance where you have 6 to 8 months out or maybe even a year. You're not going to not show up. You might have a commitment, you've promised to show up, and a commitment to yourself to be your best. And I would do things like purposefully just only run a certain distance or only run a certain speed. And the concept of a DNF or like did not finish or dropping to a shorter distance, that was just... it was kind of okay. Like I embraced the reality that was best for me in the long term. So those are the types of things that come up. Initially, from the outside, they would look like a failure. But if there's anything that I'm comfortable with, it's sort of the long game. And so, living through those moments and growing from them and having them in memory to draw from for a future. Is huge for getting you through those darker moments down the road where you've overcome something that was very challenging. And so I would say that I don't look at failure as necessarily a bad thing, and I think it's an absolutely critical piece to getting back out there and continuing to evolve.
So let's go back to that first failure. We'll call it failure. We like to call it opportunity because you're always learning something. And I guess that was a bad word for me to use. But in that first 30-day challenge, when you stopped at day 21, how did you shift the mind? Because I'm sure there was a moment where you might have felt like, forget this. Like, this isn't going to happen. Maybe I'm not meant to run. I guess you were in weightlifting before. Maybe that's what I'm supposed to do. This is a sign of things that are fighting against me. How did you shift in that moment to then again start to go after that goal?
I would say that I kind of knew that I set the goal to be achievable. So this is a great example of what I felt it was kind of a big goal for me at the time, but I knew pretty much anybody should be able to run 30 days in a row. Like even if it's a small distance. And I happened to choose 2 miles because to me it was like 15 to 20 minutes. I have no excuses for 15, 20 minutes any day. You always have time. Like you just have to decide that that's going to be time for you. You set it aside and you make it a priority, right? Like you really have to look at your hierarchy of value. And so I think what I realized was, well, my body wasn't quite ready. My mind was ready for sure. I was going to do this. And I just needed a little bit of time for the body to heal. I got like a little bit sick and run down because my body had, I was surprising it. I was shocking it in a way. And but I knew that was going to be one of the challenges I was going to face physically in that transformation, because I literally was going from not being able to run a mile without stopping for a few weeks trying to build up to just start this, to going a couple miles a day. And the joints need time you have all these different layers of systems in your body, right? And the mind is probably one of the stronger ones, one of the more powerful ones, both for negative and for positive. And your body just has all these other layers that had to adapt and evolve. And that first 21 days, it proved to me that I could do 21 days. So, well, heck, if I can do 21 days, why not 30? And so I was able to just reset. I had 2 weeks. It was just probably like a cold. I probably had like cold symptoms. It was in that sort of October to November timeframe. And I think it was November. And then as I came out of that and felt better, I was like, I'm going to start this again. Yeah, the rest is history from that perspective.
It seems as though you have this like innate, always moving forward type of programming, let's say, right? It's like in your subconscious, which is our conditioned mind. And that's where our belief systems lie. That's where our patterns lie and all of our history. Were you always like this as a kid? Like, what was your growing up environment like?
Yeah, I think my parents and I essentially had 3 parents. I mean, I had my mom and dad who were an amazing influence on my life. And then I also had my grandma. I called her Nana, but she was essentially a third parent, retired by the time I was a little kid, and would take me around and, pick me up from preschool, for example. And I had 3 really fantastic like parental influences from that perspective who really instilled upon me, I think, just this idea that like you can do anything, like you put your mind to. And they provided me the opportunity to try all different types of things. They immersed me in different types of experiences, from all the sports you can imagine to all like musical training and so forth. And I think that definitely helped shape the way I'd see the world and how I would see, challenges. My dad, for sure, has always been an extremely positive person, like maybe the most positive person you'll ever meet. I mean, when I think of like Kipchoge and like his outward just beaming energy, I think of my dad. I mean, that's the kind of person he is, and he's always been. He's extremely optimistic, and I'm for certain that that's a big source of energy for me. And I think I've taken time to ingest sort of the learnings of both all my parents and my grandma, and have chosen to embrace a lot of those qualities from the example that they've set. So I definitely have always felt, as far as I can remember back, seeing the world as the glass half full. And I'm attracted to the glass half full, idea, the optimism. I would say from my dad's perspective, I can go a little deeper there. I could say that when I was a kid, whether you believe in sort of the Tony Robbins type influence or not, like strip away all the things we know about positive or negative, there was a very low period in my dad's life, as my parents had gone through separation, all that stuff, and he was trying to find strength and energy and hope. And I was at an age where I could absorb a lot of that. And so he was going through this process of reinstilling, I think, hope in his world. And that transferred over to me at the same time. And there was just a great deal of positivity in that process. So I would say that that's probably at the root of a lot of the way I see the world, the way I see, as you mentioned, like the crisis moment, where it's this moment of opportunity. There's danger elements, but there's opportunity. And you could choose to focus on the danger, or you could choose to focus on the opportunity. And they're really sort of, I think, maybe basic life lesson type moments, or maybe even if you were to look from the outside, they're just, well, duh, shouldn't we all see something in a particular way? It's almost so obvious when you hear someone talk about it. Those little things would come through, those little life lessons. And so I would attribute a lot of it to that period of my life, probably.
And that's such an incredible gift to grow up within that kind of power. And what I mean by power is, yes, the optimism, really, really powerful when there's so much about our society that is focusing on the fear, the failure as bad, things like that. Vulnerability, this ability to fail. Vulnerability is so incredibly powerful. And I can completely relate to that type of upbringing. I was definitely, from a very young age, always told that I could do anything. I mean, there was never a limit on what I could do. And my parents they live in New England, and, my mom's on the beach in the middle of a nor'easter taking deep breaths saying, "It's so crisp out here," whereas everyone else is like hoarding the milk and the eggs and battening down the hatches. And she's standing in the middle of it in total gratitude. Do you remember as a child, like, your first dream and making it happen, or pursuing it, I should say?
Wow. As a kid, most of my goals and dreams, I think, were related to probably sports, but not necessarily running. I was never a runner as a kid, or I never would consider myself to have been a runner. I loved playing golf, of all sports, or games, depending on how you look at it. And part of that was a sort of bonding moment for my dad and I in particular. Also my mom as well. She would join us in many occasions, but we had this very inexpensive like public course that was a couple miles away from our house. I would wait for my dad at the bus stop. He'd come home from work from the bus stop. He'd work in the city, and it probably took an hour or something. And we would go just before sunset, and it would be maybe dusk, so we could play a few holes. And I was probably 8 or 9 years old. I think the goals when you're that, your scope and scale is just very different, right? Your whole world seems like your whole hometown seems so huge, right? For example, and in reality, you go back and you're like, this is small, this is tiny, so I think in those moments, my goals were probably very small. They were, I want to be able to play, play golf, like maybe be a scratch golfer or something like that. And ultimately, with enough time and energy and effort and practice, I was able to be a scratch golfer when I was like 13 years old. And so I think that was probably one of my first introductions to setting what at the time was probably a very aggressive goal, and dreaming about that, and dreaming about sharing those family moments, and then executing it. Per your comment earlier, I had the best cheering section you could possibly imagine. So the support system of my mom, my grandmother, and my dad were just, even going through a period where my parents weren't necessarily together. That happened when I was about 11. The support I had from my family on all levels was unparalleled. And in my world, anything was possible for sure.
So you said that when you were younger, the goals were maybe a little bit smaller scale. And there's a lot of people who, are our age, in our 40s or 30s or 20s, that I hear this all the time. Well, it was just a 5K. It was just a sprint. As far as goals being relative, what do you have to say to that person who says those things? Like, it minimizes what really is showing them that anything is possible.
There's definitely a scale of relativity to our goals. And what I would say is we're all at a different stage in achieving those goals. And so what for somebody is, a 5K goal, that may be just as difficult and as challenging in that person's world. So 9 years ago, when I was trying to run a couple miles without stopping, that was a significant goal for me, and that was very difficult. And it was challenging enough where it took me many weeks to achieve. So the scale there was, many weeks to achieve. And now, of course, I do have to think about what I say sometimes. And the phrase, it's just a marathon, comes out a lot. And that's a very common thing in the ultra-marathoning world when you're running 100 or 200 mile races. And oftentimes, maybe without a lot of like continued training, you just draw on a lot of experience, or you have a very strong base of endurance. I would just say we're all in a different stage of our evolution and of our journey, and each particular goal may have a different, process and timeline. It's really fun for me to talk to people who have a big goal and are able to talk about it with a similar intensity of challenge. How difficult it is for them to do the training, to put in the work, and to wrap their head around what that ultimate achievement is, whether it be a 5K or half marathon or an ultra. There's sort of like no wrong way to view a big goal. Like, you're always going to be correct in how you feel about the goal, and that's what's really important.
With your phenomenal support team as a child and growing up and pursuing your goals, how important is the ultra running community to you?
The trail and ultra community is amazing, right? The friendships, the bonds that are built out on the trails are beyond anything I've experienced in any other group environment in that regard. In many cases, your guard is completely down. You're talking to people maybe sometimes for the first time, and you're divulging all these deep and oftentimes difficult to express the feelings of maybe dark places you've been, or challenges you've overcome, or celebrating in successes of things you've just done. And so it's a therapy world, right? It's this ability to really not feel judged, to not feel like there's anything wrong with your path to getting to be out there on those trails. It's one of the most, I'd say, accepting environments I've ever experienced or could possibly have experienced. And I do feel like it's a different environment. It's a different environment experience for everybody, but I do get a different feel from the trail and ultra community than I do from any other type of athletic community that I've experienced thus far, in such a way that the concept of competitiveness being more important than, say, the well-being of a person who's out there. And we use this example a lot in the ultra trail community, but I mean, if someone had a problem or an issue, you're going to stop and ask, like, how you doing? Is there anything I can do to help you? That is 100% commonplace. And versus maybe on a road race, nothing wrong with road races, but there's element of competition that's very different. And, you might see someone who's struggling and not say anything and just zoom on by. And part of that might just be the size of the field of some of these races. But there's just something special about it. And I think also being a little bit smaller, so we talk about scale again, there's something about those intimate relationships that are built and bonded on the trail, going through a very common, difficult challenge in many cases, in most cases for ultras, that you can easily relate to immediately. And all those similar experiences that you, depending on where you are in your journey, again, whether you've done 10 ultras, 1 ultra, 100 ultras, you can relate to and immediately talk about. It's very difficult in life to communicate on those levels in other ways without really knowing somebody's experiences. As soon as you get on the trail, you've got this common body of experiences to draw on, to talk about, to connect on, and it's a beautiful thing.
The environment that you just shared, that perspective, do you see a benefit in the sport growing? Obviously there's a benefit in growing, but the size of events, coming from the triathlon world, these events are 3,000 people. To the marathon, it's like 50,000 people. For ultra trail running, we're talking, could be 50 people, 150 people, maybe max of 300 people. That connection could get lost in the scheme of things. What's your take on the growth of trail running?
So I can completely relate to that. I've run New York City Marathon a few times, 50,000 plus people. That's a delightful and energizing experience in itself, very different than a 300-person, 100-mile race in the States, which is also very different from 2,600 people towing the line at UTMB, which would be similar to a size of a triathlon event where, you are shoulder to shoulder with people for almost the entire race. It is a very different experience and beautiful and interesting in and of itself. I think we have one amazing thing working for us with the trail community that we don't really have as much control over, which I think will help here. There's a couple things I would say on this, but most trail systems can't handle more than X number of people. And in many cases, the trail races, especially if they're on single track or double track trail through a national forest or a state park or something like that, they will have a limit on how many people they'll allow to be on the trail. So there's this beautiful mechanism. It's not to say that I'm for limiting use of these trails, because I think the trails are there for us to use. We want that. We want more people out on the trails, respecting the trails, helping to maintain the trails, enjoying the trails. But naturally, there aren't going to be so many trail races that are overrun because of size, because of that reason alone. There'll be some shorter races that maybe aren't on some of those state parks or those public lands, and they will grow and get larger. The largest 100-milers in the U.S., thankfully, there are only a couple that go over, say, 500 people. And, one of them's the Javelina 100, which I've run a few times out in the desert. There's plenty of space for people. That environment is amazing, even though it's quite large. I think they can get 600-700 people when they do that. They've transformed it with the way they've laid out the space. They have this amazing community camp almost, where you run through this camp. You're going to run through it 5 times if you're running the 100-mile. People are cheering. Your crews can hang out and chat with each other. It's really like almost like a festival to vibe. It's magical. On the other side of it, you have the Leadville Trail 100-milers, where I got to experience for the first time this year, and it was a very different experience, a very different vibe. It's really hard to, even between those two, Leadville being the largest in the country, they had probably 800 plus people, and it was an out and back setup. So they had a lot of logistical challenges and issues that where you could tell they went beyond what was probably natural for that particular course. That course probably should only be handling maybe 400 or 500 people, and or they should be changing some of the timing restrictions, because they're very aggressive on timing because of the out and back nature of the course and the altitude that you're sitting at. They've set very aggressive time cutoffs where in many cases there's so many people on the trail you can't really get around other runners. There might be 20 or 30 runners in a row. So if you're trying to hit a cutoff and you're stuck behind a slow train, that could be a challenge. So I think a lot of it's rooted in the race directors and the groups that are organizing the events to really think through those types of challenges and make them more accommodating for the runners, so that people have a chance to finish and have a successful experience. The intimacy of the trail and ultra community, especially in local regions, I don't think there's going to be any problem with maintaining that. I mean, there's a very specific mindset to go out and volunteer, to go out and work on the trails. More events is not necessarily a worse thing. I mean, I think you introduce additional people to the trail and ultra community, and you're able to get maybe even more events. I don't think the current events will necessarily be ruined by any of that kind of growth. And if anything, it will help provide maybe more opportunities to run different trails, different routes, maybe get more trail maintenance going. That would be the glass half full way to look at that. From a general overall size, like what I hope we don't have happen is big races trying to push through on small trails where there's issues of congestion in the experience. So from a logistical standpoint, you want to feel like you're out in nature. You want to feel like you're out on the trails, just like you might be on a weekend. You want to encourage the idea that you're detaching from the sort of day-to-day busy lifestyle, or the busy your work world, or whatever it is that's maybe more chaotic in your life, and have that chance to connect with nature. The before and after of trail running, the training part of trail running, the meetup groups and all that stuff, that's not going anywhere. That's like the meat of stuff too. That's where you're creating those bonds. Saturday weekend, 20-mile training runs, and then after runs, when you've completed your run, you're out there cheering for other people as they're coming through that finish line. And a lot of times I'll go out and I might go to an aid station and see some of my friends come through, depending on the distance of the race and so forth, and really embracing those moments and connecting with people there. I don't think that's going anywhere.
And I think that there's a reverence for the trails and nature. Also like a humbling by nature that we all experience as trail runners, which you're not going to get running the streets of New York City. You're just, it could rain and all of that, but if something happens to the road, they can just throw some more pavement down. One of the things I love about the 100-mile races is that and even some of the smaller ones, they require the trail work. They require you to volunteer as a part of your qualification to even show up at the start line. And I love that, like giving back to the trail. And the thing is that you and I run very different paces, but we can both agree that, Black Mountain is a technical trail. Right. And that we're up against the same thing, right? Like Noble Canyon can be technical. That can be hot. It can be,
very,
sandy
very
and slow and all of those things. And so there's something about the nature that really levels the playing field. And for somebody who is kind of like, I want to get into trail running and, I don't know about the groups. What if I'm last? Like I've been first, I've been last, I've been in the middle. Nobody cares.
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody cares. You don't
Yeah.
care if I'm last.
No. Yeah.
So I want to get back to the Great Eight. You threw in some other races other than just the Great Eight, like UTMB, like Tahoe 200, in the midst of completing these 800-mile races in one season. So when did it all begin?
Yeah, the first race was the Old Dominion, and that was the very end of May, early June, that weekend. And that's a race out in Virginia. It's the second oldest race in the U.S. That race is really kind of interesting because it's still like a family-run, really small group. There's less than 100 runners, and I'm not really sure why it's like so intimate and small. It might just be the part of the country that it's in, but beautiful area, rolling hills. It's in the sort of backcountry area in Virginia. I had never had a chance to experience it. It's sort of a couple hours southwest of Baltimore, Washington, D.C., that kind of area. The haystacks are kind of rolled, like the hills are green. It's just beautiful. So that was early June, late May. 2 weeks later, I ran Mohican Trail, 100 mile, and that one was about an hour and a half south of Cleveland in Ohio, in a town called Loudonville, and it's sort of staged at this the starting and finish area is near sort of an outdoor adventure setup. I think they're even called outdoor adventures or something like that. And there's this lake that's there, and there's cabins on the lake, and then there's this beautiful forest, state park, I believe, with about a 25-mile route of trail, and you end up doing it 4 times. The weather turned on us to flash flooding. It like literally in the middle of, like, maybe after the sun went down, it was like flash flood warnings. I had some earbuds in. I was trying to listen to a podcast while I was out there on my third loop of this race, and it kept getting interrupted. My phone was getting interrupted by the emergency broadcast system because of the torrential downpour. It didn't stop raining for probably 8 hours straight. There was points in that race where the visibility turned into, a few feet in front of you, and you're trying to traverse this sort of slick, mud-ridden trail that was flowing down rivers in this little forest. And that was a pretty wild and challenging race to get through, especially the nighttime. I felt the most, I think, wrecked after that one. Took me a good 25 or 26 hours or something like that to finish that one. Beautiful park though. The first 2 loops through, spectacular, lush, green. I didn't really know what to expect when I went out there, and it was this amazing surprise. And actually, that's one of the things that was also very exciting about this project was I'd only run one of the 8 before. One of the 8 races being Angeles Crest, which I had done 3 times before. It's also one of our local 100-milers in the Angeles National Forest. So Loudonville, I mean, wow, that was an experience. And literally, like, the next day when I finished, I went back to the hotel and showered and everything. I turned on the TV just to relax, and the news comes on, and it's all flash flood videos of, parking lots and streets underwater. And I'm thinking, all these poor folks out here, if they even had an idea what we were doing out in the mountains, like, they'd probably think we're nuts.
Do you ever have those moments, like maybe you had that moment in the hotel room where you look back and you're watching the news and you're like, wow, what I actually did was crazy?
Yeah. That's how I felt. I'm like, oh my gosh. The attrition rate was very high. I think a lot of people threw in the towel there, and understandably, it was a pretty gnarly situation, especially if it was like your first experience of a 100-miler. It would have been a very rude awakening to some degree. I hope it doesn't discourage people from going back and trying again, because those trails out there were spectacular, to the point where I think, I would want to go back just to run a couple loops in those trails again. So after that race, Western States was 2 weeks after that. And so I'd gone from Virginia to Ohio, and now to Tahoe and the Squaw Valley area, where, of course, the Olympics have been held. And that was this whole other sort of Super Bowl of 100-mile environments, where in the U.S. it's literally the most coveted race to get into, first of all, and then to be able to even spectate or to crew or to volunteer, that is in and of itself almost a gift, or I want to say privilege, because that's not really the right word, but there's something just very magical about that race. Also being the original 100-miler, that was amazing.
And it was a snow year this year.
Yes.
So didn't they have to reroute the course a little bit?
We were very fortunate in that the course was the original course. They didn't have to do any rerouting. I had been up there for the training weekend, which when we were talking about sort of the trail ultra community bonding experience, I recommend people go and just sign up for that. Even if you don't get into Western states, go for the training weekend. That was incredible. And we had a lot more snow in the training weekend, which was about 4 or 5 weeks before. I think it was the Labor Day weekend or something like that. Before the race.
Memorial Day.
Memorial Day. Thank you. Yeah, that's right. Labor Day is at the end of summer. So we did have snow. The race, for anyone who doesn't know, it starts at the bottom of the Squaw Valley, like where the main Squaw Valley eateries are and so forth. And you run up the escarpment, we call it, which is essentially up, the Black Diamond slopes for about 4 miles until you get to the top. A couple days before the race, my wife and I went out there. And about a mile and a half up, there's no snow. There's just, you can see water coming down, rushing down little streams. And you get to some patches of snow. And then you get to, okay, we're post-holing now. And it's incredible because this is the end of June in California. The elevation, we're talking about probably only 7,500 feet, maybe 8,000 feet. They're able to take these machines, these like giant snow moving machines, and shape the snow to create skiing opportunities into like the first week of July. And so while we're out on this sort of exploring the escarpment run, hike, mostly hiking on the way up, and we flew on the way down, but just flying down the snow, which is amazing. And there's a very special way to sort of run where you're getting your heel into the snow, so you kind of slide a little bit as you're going. That was incredible. But we actually got to witness and chat with some of the people who are shaping these ski runs, essentially at the top. So the last 2 or 3 miles were all snow covered. And we're trying our best not to step on the actual slope, because it was going to be, I think, one of the last 2 weekends they were going to have any skiing available for folks up at the top. So that was just, I didn't even know that was a thing, that you would start shaping the available snow up there.
Oh, yeah, those skiers are hardcore, man.
They're
going to go
awesome.
Until like the last green is gone.
They totally were.
Nor would they
sure.
understand why anybody would want to run up
what
they're skiing down.
They were kind of, they knew about the race. I think the guys who were, there were like 3 of these giant machines, and it was very fascinating because they would cable into these giant poles because it was so steep. It was like a safety type of protocol, and the cable will hold up this giant machine. We're talking about something that's probably 3, 4, 5 times a tractor's size, with a giant like metal wall on the front of it so it can push snow. It is wild. But yeah, you could tell they're taken back. They're like, oh, that's this weekend. In their world, they're just trying to make the ski run work for folks who are going to come out there. But that was a beautiful process of kind of going up the slope, watching them. Is almost an art form, like really, to make that work. The next 2 mornings later, or the next morning when we ran the race, all those the work that they'd done had iced over. And so when we ran the race, we're on sort of this interesting corduroy patterned, because like I think the snow pushers had like some sort of groove at the bottom. So the snow, the quote unquote trail to get up to the very top, beautiful. Spectacular.
There's a tradition where you stop at the top of the escarpment, right, and watch the sunrise. And the pros do it, like the leaders do it. And I think that's such a beautiful moment of just like take it in, gratitude, and really showing what's underneath the competition of the sport.
when you turn your head around and look at the sunrise, it is, because you are facing away from the sun as you run up the escarpment, the sun's rising behind you. So you can start to see the light creep around, and you turn around and it's this bright orange glow. We had a really amazing weather for that morning, for that sunrise. And it's glowing over the Lake Tahoe behind you. It is very magical that the elite leaders will take moments like that and embrace them and pause and look back. And it's not about, I'm going to beat you onto the single track and get that 2-second lead over you. It's, let's enjoy this together. You know, we're a community. There's another 90 something miles to run. Let's not worry about like missing. We shouldn't be missing this, a beautiful sunrise. That is a very special thing. And the community comes out for just that moment, and they'll go out probably at 4 a.m. or something like that to get up to the top to cheer people on and also enjoy that sunrise, even if they're not running.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
It's spectacular. So Western States was a dream in and of itself. The support along the course is unparalleled, unmatched to any other U.S. race. Maybe the Hurt 100 in Hawaii, I have to give them a shout out. They have an amazing like 5-to-1 volunteer to runner ratio or something like that. Western States is probably very similar. We didn't talk about this earlier, but my dad was born and raised in Hawaii, and there is this aloha spirit. It's a very real thing, and it's a very positive thing, and everybody is family. That ties and it really complements this idea of like the trail running community being very encouraging and accepting. And so, yeah, if you have a chance to run the Hurt 100, take it, make it happen, sign up, put your name in the lottery. That is a beautiful race. And the community is there. It's really hard to even explain without just saying you have to experience. Even being there to volunteer is this amazing thing. So
there's a great documentary on the Hurt, on the origins of Hurt 100. I think it's definitely on YouTube.
In the last couple years? I've watched that, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just called The Hurt.
Yeah.
Which is such a great name.
I'm in there somewhere because I got to run it in 2017. And
when they filmed it?
Yeah, I'm in the background of some of the
cool.
the shots on the film. So yeah,
I highly recommend if you guys don't know what the Hurt is, or if you're thinking about it, or if it makes your stomach feel a certain way like mine just did, then follow that for sure.
Absolutely.
Because that seems like, and you know, the islands are they're very, very spiritual energy there.
Yeah.
So, you know, Kona, the Ironman World Championship is on the Big Island, and, you know, everybody talks about that, like just how powerful it is there. So
absolutely.
All right. So what happened after Western States? Where'd you go?
So yeah, Western was incredible. Had a great race there. Got to finish the race with my wife running the last section of the race. For those listening, a lot of the longer races will allow a pacer or different pacers to join you. So that was a really special moment to finish on the track with my wife there. After Western States, I had a nice 3-week gap until the Vermont 100. And the Vermont 100 was really a kind of a question mark for me because I wasn't sure what to expect. And in large part, it was due to the format. This is the only 100-mile race left, as far as I know, in the world where horse riders and horses are competing on the same exact trail at the same time as the 100-mile runners. And I have heard of other races that do big races like Iditarod, Sport, where you have, you know, maybe fat tire biking along with running, along with maybe skiing all at the same time. But this was horseback riding, and I was thinking to myself, I had no idea if these trails are going to be overcrowded. Am I going to be dodging, you know, manure the whole way? Like, what? And these are kind of preposterous maybe sounding to folks who've run it, but if you haven't run that and experienced it, it was a question mark. And so the Vermont 100 was magical. I mean, it was a beautiful part of the country, first and foremost. I mean, the Northeast, New Hampshire, Vermont, just spectacular. And that time of year was very humid and hot. And so that was sort of one of the bigger challenges of the weekend there. Extremely humid. The heat index with the humidity got up to the 106 or 108, to the point where folks were commenting. I mean, that was sort of the headline takeaway. And a 44% finisher rate was a very, very low finisher rate. And I think majority of that had to do with the heat and the humidity. But the experience of running side by side with the horse riders, they didn't have us start exactly at the same time, to be clear. So we were able to thin out enough on the trails and on the fire roads and on the course that the horseback riders didn't approach the leaders or the lead groups probably for the first 30 miles or so. And once they did, there was plenty of space for everybody. And there may have been, a couple hundred runners and maybe, 75 or 50 to 80, I'm going to guess, horseback riders. And that was just a really special thing. The challenge, I mean, I'm sure folks on the horses were looking at the runners like, oh my gosh, that's a long way to run. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm seeing people kind of bounce up and down on the horse. I'm thinking, I don't know if I could sit for that long, because I would say the average finish time for the horses was probably, if they finished, because of the heat, I think a lot of them had to call it a day, because you have to think about not just yourself as a rider, but the actual animal and the well-being of the animals. And I believe horses, the way they breathe is very much tied to the way they stride, and so there's some anatomical challenges with keeping them cool and hydrated and everything. But that experience of being able to kind of look up and think, I'm glad I'm running this thing. How amazing is it that they're going to endure 20 hours or so on average to finish, whereas, running, maybe we're taking 24 to 30 hours or whatever it was to get through. So that was a really beautiful experience. They took great care of the animals. You could really tell that the passion of that particular sort of, I don't want to say genre of sport, but also takes a very specific, mindset to go out there and not only care for yourself, but also you're out there caring for your animal as well. So that was wild. Really, really glad I was able to experience that one. After Vermont was a success. Had another couple weeks until the Angeles Crest 100, and so that was back. I'd say that it's a hometown race in that it's only a couple hours away from San Diego in the Angeles National Forest, and so we start just a little bit outside of Big Bear in a town called Wrightwood, and it's also a mountain town, and in the winter it will covered in snow, and those trails and those mountains are known for a lot of people hike what's called Mount Baldy in Southern California, and that's one of a kind of a common mountain goal to summit there. But we go through this beautiful system of trails. We have a few sections where we have to kind of deviate because of some of the endangered species, in particular some of the frogs. But the course is spectacular. Very hot and exposed. Early on in the race, you're at higher altitudes, and then you slowly go all the way down to a town called Altadena, which is just outside of Pasadena. That particular race has a pretty strong relationship with the Forest Service, and in large part that's due to some of the relationships that have been forged over the years by some kind of visionary folks in the world of trail and ultras, and some really special people who dedicate their time, their free time, to help organize things like the trail work that's required, and they'll set them up on the course. And we have a couple of people who, just really, they take on that responsibility. They help do trainings. Like there's people who've been trained to do things like learn how to use chainsaws and everything from that to like just the safety precautions of going out there on the trail and using different tools, to just showing up, like setting the time. Here's where we meet. Here's where we're going to go. They'll plan on what section we're going to repair, or which section needs some brush cleared, or whatever it is, or some down trees. And there's just amazing human beings who are wired in such a way that they know that it's the right thing to be doing, take care of these trails. And it's in many ways a win-win. If we don't have the race out there, those trails, they're going to get a little bit of love, but a lot of them won't. And eventually they disappear. And if people don't use them and maintain them. So there's an incredible positive outcome of having a trail run in an area where you do want to get that volunteer time out there as well. And if you can connect those two together, it's a beautiful thing. So going back to Angeles Crest, it was for me a terrific race. I was able to push pretty hard there and chase down, because I had run the race before. I knew it really well. It was my fourth time running it, so I was able to chase down a pretty decent time there, which I was happy about. And it was kind of the middle of this Great Eight, so it was sort of a great.
What was your final time?
A great moment. Well, I was able to get under 25 hours, which, considering having 300 milers in June, having the legs to be able to do that. They give a special buckle. They have a sub 24 buckle, which usually maybe 10 people will get in the race. So it's just the top handful of people. And then they have this extra hour from 24 to 25, and it's almost a celebration of the sunrise. It's kind of a twofold thing. It's called the second sunrise buckle, but it's sort of acknowledging that maybe you didn't get the sub 24 you're going after, which is extremely difficult, but you're not going to give up, right? There's just a little additional motivation to keep going, and it's actually the most rare buckle to get because of that. So it sort of speaks to, just keep grinding, keep hammering away, keep going for it. And
because probably most of those people were going for sub 24.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perseverance.
A few of us might not have necessarily been trying for that realistically. Like, I knew my legs were pretty. I had put in a lot of miles in these other races, and I knew first and foremost I need to finish the race. But sometimes you can surprise yourself in situations where you least expect it, and I think that was one of those moments for me. And I just put myself in a good position. I'd say just smart about the heat conditions during the day there, getting to the hundreds. And so I was just very smart during the day, and I had that burst of energy going through the evening and night, and it was an opportunity to push and see how close I could get. So I would say down the road, I probably will try to do a sub 24. In that particular case, it was a stretch goal for sure to do second sunrise. Mm-hmm. So that was definitely really special. My poor pacer, like he we went through a section where he knew it was going to be close, and I was really feeling it. He said, just go fly. And so that was one of those moments, unfortunately, where that happened. But
so your fourth 100 of the season, you drop your pacer. Makes sense. Okay, so what's next? What came after?
So from Angeles Crest, we had 2 weeks to get to Leadville.
Oh yeah.
And the Leadville Trail 100, I would say of all of the Great Eight project, it was my biggest question mark. I was most concerned about what is this altitude going to do, and it wasn't we're going to climb over a certain height, 'cause I'd run up over 12,000 feet in a race before. In Utah at the Tushers 100K, beautiful course, by the way. Also an Air Viper race, but I think we went up to Denali Peak, and that was over 12,000 feet. It was not the highest peak that was a concern. It was the average altitude that you're running at, which was my big question mark, being someone from San Diego.
Highest town in the U.S., Leadville. It sits like at the highest elevation, right?
It feels like it does.
Yeah.
So
you're already like,
you're averaging in this 10, 11,000 foot range of elevation, and for someone from San Diego who trains at 600, 700 feet altitude, maybe above sea level, running over 10,000 feet for the entire race roughly was a big mystery. I knew I was going to be fit going in there. I might be tired, but I knew I had sort of the cardiovascular fitness and the strength and so forth. So that was the big question mark. I was able to go out there feeling pretty tired from my Angeles Crest experience and how hard I pushed there. So I definitely admit to feeling pretty tired from that, but I managed to squeak by. That one was a squeaker for sure. I got to, and I didn't think about this ahead of time. It's just been such a whirlwind of a summer logistically. I was waiting till like a few days before a lot of races to even look at what the details of the race were, to read the race briefings, to look at the maps. It wasn't like the only race on the summers where you would immerse yourself maybe in looking at all the details and maybe training specifically for that particular race, which a lot of people will do for Leadville. Or they'll live in Colorado where they can train year round at these really high altitudes. And if you look at the top finishers, the top pages of finishers at Leadville, they're all from Colorado. They're all from high altitude. 90-something% of them are, for sure. It's almost like a mind-boggling thing. You look at it and you're like, okay, to do well here, you really need to train at altitude. I managed to get to the halfway point, the turnaround. You have to go up this enormous climb. I think it peaks out at just under 13,000 feet. It's called Hope Pass. The peak itself, goes up over, I think, 14,000. We don't run quite to the peak. We run over the pass, which is a little bit lower. And I get to the turnaround. I'm feeling okay, but I can feel that climb was rough. And this is the famous Hope Pass conundrum where you go down it and then you turn around, it's coming. So I struggled badly through that section. I think it was a combination of all of it, just all the miles from the other races combined with the altitude. And I wasn't like I mentioned, I wasn't thinking about cutoffs, but it turned out that I'd made the cutoff by only an hour at the turnaround. I wasn't even thinking of this. And so I get to the top, I get to the aid station there. There's this beautiful aid station. They had llamas. They had used llamas to get the gear up to the aid station there. Really, really amazing. So anyways, long story short, I get to a little further down in the race, maybe 60 something miles in, and I come cruising into the aid station. I have a pacer with me, by the way, too, who's helping me on this section. And my wife comes running over. She sees me come through. She's like, "You have 15 minutes." And I'm like, "What? What are you talking about?" It was dark by now, and I'm worried about like a headlamp or something. I don't know. And she's like, "The cutoff to get through here and out of this aid station is in 15 minutes. Like, we have to go." I had all these plans of taking my shoes off because we had just forded this river. And so my feet I have almost the teeth chattering coldness going on because it was like icy cold water. And it's dark now. Anyways, and I immediately like flipped a switch in my head, which was like, oh my gosh, there's really extreme cutoffs here. I'm not usually worried about this kind of stuff. It lit a fire, and I went in and out of that station in a handful of minutes, ran out and just went 100% the whole way to the next aid station. Kind of a little perplexed that had just happened. It was, again, I've definitely run races at the back of the pack before, typically while injured, but when healthy, I have never even considered that, and this was very humbling. And I went as fast as I could, and I banked maybe 30 minutes. So now I have 45-minute cushion. That's still very stressful. Even knowing that you're even thinking about a cutoff is stressful.
Because at this point, you probably have, 20 to go?
At that point, I probably had, somewhere in that range. Yeah. I still had maybe a marathon to run. And thankfully, I didn't have any kind of specific injury that was slowing me down, or it was just the overall difficulty with altitude. And I think the number of miles my legs had been my legs and body had gone through up to that point. And so it's just a matter of just moving forward. And I think over the next section, I might have given up 15 of those 45 minutes, and now I only have 30 minutes, so I was looking at the clock, and I probably had about half an hour when I picked up my wife for the last section. She ran the last, I want to say 10 or 12 miles.
She must have been pushing you then.
Yeah, so she was keeping me on track. That was another really special thing to be able to share that section together. And one interesting thing about this race, and I didn't know this until the very end, but they allow muling. And muling, it would be considered a disqualifying offense if you're ever to mule. Basically, by that I mean carry gear or supplies for your runner as a pacer. If you were to do that for your runner, that's cheating. In this race at Leadville, they allow for it. It's actually legal and encouraged. And I kept wondering, because I'd see some pacers with these giant packs on their back. Like I saw this one woman, she was a tiny lady. She's got this big guy running with her, and she's got this like pack that's like half her size. It looked like a 50-pound like trekking pack or something. I'm like, what is in that thing? And then reflecting upon it now, is like she was carrying all this crap for her runner. Like he must have had a whole campsite worth of stuff in that pack. It was pretty wild. But anyways, my point being, towards the end, my wife's like, "Oh, you want me to carry your poles?" And I'm like, we're not allowed to do that. Like, what are you talking about? And then she kind of filled me in, and I'm like, oh, it makes sense now. That's why other people weren't carrying anything. And I had a pack on with all my gear, because you want to make sure you have, especially for a race like that with the elements and the altitude, you're looking at making sure you have a jacket for warmth and all these other things, and of course all your hydration. But
so
anyways,
probably a little detail that you missed over by looking at the course a couple days before. That
would have been good to know. I will admit to giving my pack to my wife for the last 6 miles, and it's almost it felt embarrassing, and even to say it now, but she muled for me for the legally muled, because it's allowed, for 6 miles. It was amazing. It felt so good, knowing that I was up against those cutoffs, and here she is. She's got her pack on, and then she puts on my pack on top of her pack, and I mean, she's amazing. But that was a really unique experience. I don't think we'll ever go back to that race for a lot of different reasons, but that was it was a special one.
So what came after Leadville?
So after Leadville, we flew out to UTMB, which I refer to as a cherry on top of this Great Eight project. It's not part of the Great Eight. It's literally like the Olympics of ultra running.
Is that a lottery system? How do you get into, or is it?
It's a lottery system that has a qualifying standard. The qualifying standard over the last few years has been for the UTMB, which is the longer of the races, the big race. That one actually would require 200 to 300 mile races to finish, 200 to 300 mile races to get points to qualify, and you need enough points, and you can only do it for 3 races max. So it had to be basically 100 milers or really hard 100 kilometer races. Since most of the world is on the metric system, the difficult 100K would get you maybe 5 or 6 points, and a difficult 100 miler might get you 6 points. You needed 15, I think. You could get a maximum of 18 points, and then that would let you get into the lottery. So anyways, that was literally like 10 to 12 days after finishing Leadville. I ran UTMB.
This is a bit of like a crunch here, because you've got Leadville, UTMB, and then just 5 days later, you're
Wasatch.
Doing Wasatch.
Yeah. UTMB was at the very tail end of August. It was 2 weeks after Leadville, or 12 days after finishing Leadville. UTMB, I could just very briefly say, is again like the Olympics or Super Bowl of 100-mile races in the world. And you've got hundreds of runners from France, hundreds of runners from Italy, hundreds of runners from Switzerland, hundreds of runners from Europe. You've got 2,600 runners in total just for that particular race, towing the line at what is the biggest 100-miler in the world. It's the pomp and circumstance of the start line is just unlike anything I could ever describe. If you've watched the footage, just imagine being immersed in that world. The whole first couple miles, unless you're in the first 50 people that can actually run through the streets, you're basically walking through a parade of 2,600 other runners until it opens up, and everybody's cheering. Every door, window, every of all the little buildings of this town, everyone's yelling, cheering, videoing. The energy on the street is just amazing. It's electric, and they have this very dramatic music that's playing because they're sending us off on this journey, which has a 45 to 46 hour cutoff. We're not talking about a 30-hour 100 miler. It's similar to how the Hard Rock 100 will give you this immense amount of time. And it's because you're running over 10,000 meters of vertical gain and descent. which is about 34,000 feet of climbing. And honestly, in many cases, you'll need that time. It's incredible. The descending at UTMB going downhill, you would think is, oh, relief, I get to go downhill. The downhills were more aggressive, or just as aggressive as the very steep uphills, and very challenging. And over, that many hours of time, your legs feel that. Your legs feel that. And then if you've run 600 milers the couple months before, your legs really feel that. And but it was an amazing experience. I'd say that's probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite race that I've ever done. It was my second time, so that was extremely special. We spent some time in Switzerland exploring parts of that country, which are spectacular. The race, of course, goes from France to Italy to Switzerland, circumnavigating Mont Blanc. The mountain range is covered in glaciers and the trail systems there. Every trail system, almost every trail system in Europe that we've experienced so far is going through someone's like property or yard or something like that, and it's encouraged. It's very different than the States, where it's like don't go on my property, right?
Yeah, we just heard somebody was blocking off the trail over at Mission Trails.
Yeah,
here in San Diego.
It's crazy. It's so different over there. It's like, here's the trails we've marked for you. Come through the gate. Here, you want some food? Like, it's a very different world.
It's so interesting how we have this idea that we own parts of the earth.
Yes,
we don't own anything.
Yes,
it's such a falsity.
It's bizarre. And so if you have a chance to go and experience the Mont Blanc trail system, they actually have a beautifully marked trail system, so you don't have to run the race to do this. I think you could go out for 3 or 4 days, you could go for a week and run 10 or 15 miles a day, go back into town. They have all these refugios on the trail, and people will, you can get beverages, meals, you can take a shower. It's a beautiful experience. And it's the Trail du Mont Blanc. It's spectacular. So yeah, that's one of my favorite places. Switzerland was beautiful as well. We got to experience like the Matterhorn little town called Zermatt, where nobody has a car. It's like an all electric, almost golf cart vehicle type of town, and you take a train into it, and it's just it also has views of Monte Rosa, so this entire mountain range that separates Switzerland and Italy. It's mind-boggling how beautiful it is. And there's all this rich history of people who've, quote unquote, conquered these mountains, or the first people to, climb them and adventure and explore. And it's all very inspiring. So that was a whirlwind. We got through, UTMB, got to experience a little bit of Switzerland this time, which was unique. In the past, we've spent time in Italy, which we love. And then it was back to Wasatch. So I finished UTMB. I think it was on Sunday.
It feels like you're inventing time. You're like, we had time in Italy and Switzerland, and then I went to Wasatch. Like, it was days.
Yes.
It was days.
Yes. So we had
between UTMB and Wasatch. And
yes.
Jet lag.
Yes.
But at this point, is fatigue just fatigue? Like, you've got this relationship with fatigue that it's your norm, I would assume.
I definitely had the experience of fatigue. I would be a fatigue pro of some sort, whether I'd like it or not. Yeah, for sure. I had done a few back-to-back weekends in the past. I had run, for example, the Tahoe 200 followed by the Mogollon Monster on back-to-back weekends, and I knew how that felt. I had maybe 3 or 4 other experiences in ultra running where I had run a 100-miler on multiple consecutive week, like a mountain 100-miler, not a flat 100-miler, but back-to-back weekends of that, and knowing how my body felt. Of course, with that summer leading up to UTMB to Wasatch, I knew how all those moments were feeling.
Wasatch is no joke.
Wasatch is no joke.
So how did that go?
And that one started on a Friday. Thank you for doing that, Wasatch. So I had one less day. A lot of these will start on a Saturday, of course, but I had like a little foot issue that I was dealing with, kind of like the top of the foot, where I think I had like hyperextended something. So I'd finally had like some little issue. And it came out of the Angeles Crest. I had like a little moment out there, and I managed to get through Leadville, managed to get through UTMB, but I could feel it, and Wasatch. That was a very, very difficult start, I would say. You literally start a couple miles flat, and then you just start getting into some big climbs. It's almost like felt like a 4-mile climb. I don't know. It was probably 4,000 feet of climbing or something like that, right out the gun. Beautiful area. So this is situated just outside of Salt Lake, really close to Park City, Utah, which is another Winter Olympic venue. So just a beautiful mountain range. Got through bits and pieces of Wasatch okay to begin with, but it was definitely a struggle. I could feel the weight of Leadville. I could feel the weight of UTMB, and I could feel even Angeles Crest all the way back to that. I'd say that point. But I had the experience to draw on. I knew what it was going to take to get through this after being out there for a little bit, and I knew I had some amazing pacers lined up for the second half of the race, so I was going to have some support out there. And so I was just taking it one step at a time. Managed to get to see, my first pacer. I think that was about mile 46. They allowed pacers kind of early in that race. Usually it's at least 50. It might have even been like mile 42 when I picked up the pacer, or maybe even 30 something. It was early in the race, and I was really surprised about that. But I was thankful for it. And so my friend Tara was out there. She's a local to the area of those mountains, and within half an hour drive to the start line, maybe a little closer. And just a total badass runner. She was she was a third place American at UTMB last year. So to give you reference, in a very challenging weather year for UTMB, which typically is the case. So anyway, she was helping me through. We just, you get a little bit of momentum. You listen to your body. You just keep moving forward. Little sort of quote unquote pro tips. I mean, you try to avoid any wasted time. And by wasted time, I mean just unnecessary time spent lingering in an aid station, for example. Because at that point, all the minutes were going to matter for me, I think. I had 36 hours to finish, but again, I didn't know how the foot was going to hold up. The foot is fine at this point, but at that point, it was sort of this weird overuse feel where I knew I kind of overstretched something, and it just needed, like a week to heal or something like that. So she got me through into about 67. So it's almost like they broke out the pacing into thirds, something like that. And when I got to that point, I knew that I was going to be able to finish in terms of the time. And it was just a matter of like, how quickly can we get through the last part of this race? So I picked up my pacer. And this is in the middle of the night. My friend Bree, who is amazing. She's also local, very close. She lives really close to the finish line. So it was this really amazing dynamic. And actually, they pretty much knew everybody at the race. It was this really, I think I had the pacers who were the most popular in the entire state of Utah. I was telling them, like, you guys know everybody. Every time we bump into someone, they're like, oh, hey Tara, hey Bree. That energy was amazing as well. Like, just the energy of knowing there's all these connections. Everybody who's is there for this like amazing purpose to help all these runners get through. And I was just so very fortunate to have that support and that opportunity to be able to do that. And so we were out there the first little bit. I think I was struggling, but then in the early morning, I started to really pick up the pace, started to find a little bit of a groove. And it's one of the beautiful things about these distances is you're going to have these low moments, you're going to have high moments. And if you're in a low moment, there's going to be a high moment around the corner. You just have to think that way. And when it comes, like, you need to take advantage of it and enjoy it and embrace it. And that was one of the most fun sections I've run. And we were just blasting down these single track sections, probably 80 miles into the race, all the way to the finish. I mean, we were quote unquote flying. Legs had been through 80 miles already, In most cases, the feeling of going fast might be only like 10-minute miles or something like that. In this case, we were going probably sub 8, maybe down to sub 7 miles. Like, it was legitimately a decent speed for that point of the race. And what was incredible was I had just the right person to be with to go through that experience. Someone who's like super positive, and just both of my pacers are just incredibly strong, powerful, and energizing. But their strengths were, they were pacing me at the right time, and it was pure luck. Like, it was just, they worked out that way.
This whole thing has just been so perfectly orchestrated, right? And I think a lot of that has to do with your ability to walk into the unknown and trust, right? Like, even this organization of how these pacers came in during certain miles.
Those were the sections they wanted to pace, and it was perfect. I could not, if it was the other way around, I mean, not to say it wouldn't have been great, but the way it was the right way. And because in many cases, if I pick up the pace, I might lose my pacer, especially if I catch him off guard by just out of nowhere going really fast. Every once in a while that will happen, and I kind of feel bad. In this case, Bree, she kept up the entire 50K she was pacing. She knew I was booking it to try to hit this sub 30 mark. They do different buckles for 24, 30, and 36. I didn't think I would even have to worry about this. I thought, I'm just going to finish under 36, no big deal. But we were pushing hard enough at that point where, even with, having done UTMB and being on really spent legs, we were still able to summon up these pretty quick speeds at the end. And I didn't know, this is part of your comment about the unknown. I didn't know what the last 5 miles looked like. I had or 10 miles or 12 miles. It was just go. And as soon as I felt that, and we were going a little reckless down some cow pasture type trail that they had taken us through to get down to finally this fire road at the end. And it was like kind of a little uphill near a lake, and just, pretty, but I didn't know where the finish line was. I didn't know if it was 5 miles, because a lot of 100-mile races are not 100 miles exactly. They're 101, 100.5, 102.3, who knows? And I didn't know.
And there's no mile markers.
There's no mile markers. Your GPS watch will give you a decent estimate, but again, if you don't know how perfect your lines were, you can't
bank on your watch for I'm almost done.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a moment where not knowing the course, I probably helped me, because it was probably an unrealistic goal to get under 30, or it was at the edge of what was humanly possible for me to achieve in that moment. And it turns out, with 10 miles to go, we bump into another runner, this incredible runner from, I want to say she's from Minnesota. And she's out there running, and you could tell maybe she wasn't going to go for it at the end. And this is actually a really cool part of the story. She kind of hooks up with us. So I have a pacer, and she doesn't. We all kind of start running, and we're pushing each other, the three of us. All three of us are going, at that point, maybe sub 10-minute pace, maybe sub 9-minute pace, probably under 8-minute pace in many sections. And we're still pushing through the uphills. I mean, no one cares how fast we finish. No one cares what our finish times are, honestly. But it's just this desire to try to achieve and fulfill whatever the best is that we feel like we can in the moment. Let's get it done. Let's get it done as quickly as we can. And maybe there's this chance of getting under that 30 hour barrier. That's, again, just a personal thing. It's it's something to shoot for. Maybe you didn't set your own time goal, but they've set one for us. Let's just see what happens. So we're pushing each other. I'm leading this pack. I dropped my pacer, but I was going all out, as fast as I could go. And then this other runner, she's incredible, by the way, has run all these amazing races. And her husband was out there also running. She was way ahead of her husband. They're both incredible runners. So she's pushing. I'm flying the downhills. And so I led all the downhills until we got to this fire road, and it started to flatten out and go on this uphill climb. If anyone's run the Wasatch Front 100, you probably don't like this last 5 miles, is all I'm going to put out there. The race was spectacular and beautiful until that part of the course. You could have just had the finish line at the lake or something. But anyways, we go through it. It's just this never-ending road. She starts to hammer on the uphill. She's got really good climbing capabilities. My legs are just toast. And so now she passes me. This is the three of us. So I'm just now chasing her, and she's maybe 10 seconds ahead, 15 seconds ahead. We go a couple more miles. She's 30 seconds ahead. And I'm like, where's the finish line? Oh my gosh. We finally get to, and the course marking started to get questionable at the end. Like it was almost like you just had to know which way to go. So we're not seeing any other people. Anyway, she keeps pushing and she gets in like a minute under the 30-hour mark. And I had fallen back a little bit, and I think I got 2 minutes. I finished like 2 minutes over. But to me, it was collectively, neither one of us were going to get under 30 if both of us hadn't teamed together and pushed. The three of us, excuse me. And my pacer was incredible. And
I mean, without pushing, that could have been an hour slower.
Yeah. Oh, easily.
Yeah, right.
Easily. You could just choose to walk the last, because at a certain point, if there was no motivation that you found deep inside to just push, and you didn't have that different buckle or whatever goal, then yeah, I mean, there's no difference, because again, no one cares. Like if you get 30 hours in 2 minutes or 35 hours in 59 minutes, it's all I know is it's getting hot, and I'm like, I want to finish. So there's also this like satisfaction of like you smell the barn, you want to just cross the finish and fall to the ground and be in the shade. Maybe have something cold to drink, and then just chat with your friends who finished and watch people come in and all that stuff, all the good stuff after you finished. So.
But as I say to people who are like on the side of the trail, I always say, there's nobody coming for you.
Yeah.
Like nobody's coming for you. You've got to get to the finish line.
Yeah.
Get up. Like you got to keep moving. So you've got one more to go, and that's not this weekend, is it?
Not this weekend, but so after Wasatch, we ran Tahoe.
Right.
Tahoe 200, a whole nother story. And then that was 2 weeks ago. And I'm 1 week out. So next weekend, first weekend of October, is the Arkansas Traveler, and that is the 8th of the Great Eight.
Amazing. This is just, I mean, I feel like we could dive into Tahoe 200, and that could be a whole other podcast.
Absolutely, yeah.
But just amazing feat that you have dreamed up and succeeded at. I mean, you really have already achieved incredible success. So, gosh, like I said, you guys, if you're not following Sean, definitely follow him, UltraRunner SD on Instagram. That's where you're most active, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And gosh, any words of wisdom, anything that comes to you to encourage those to maybe dream big or go longer or sign up for that first 5K, whatever it is?
Yeah, I would say for sure, think about taking that first step. Actually, don't think about it. Just take that first step. Don't worry about having everything figured out. In a lot of cases, I would say, if the goal is a distance, find a race, sign up for the race, and figure everything else after. Figure out step 2. Once you got step 2, you'll figure out step 3. Reach out to the community. Reach out to me. Reach out to your friends who run. Ask questions. Be curious. No matter what it is, you can always go and try again. So even if the first one isn't a success, or even if it is a success, there's a good chance you're going to want to see what else there is naturally, and embrace that. And enjoy it, because we think about the finish line as this ultimate goal, but really it's the adventure and the journey and everything that happens en route to that.
Amazing. Well, we're going to put links to all these races that you've done. Link to you, how people can get a hold of you, how people can follow Jenny, who's walking in the door now from her run. She's no joke.
That's right.
And I know she's been right by your side for many, many of these miles and the dreams and all those dreams coming to fruition. You guys are amazing. So just keep going. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you guys.